I'd like to work again, but I'd never been a guy who would sell his soul to get, money.
We are headed into the storm of all storms. Yes.
$250 million. 251 million. That's not a flop. That's not a disappointment. That's one of the most successful independent films in American history. And the mainstream press said absolutely nothing. No reviews, no morning shows, no late night circuit, no awards buzz. Nothing. Ask yourself one question. When has a film that made $251 million at the box office been treated like it didn't exist? The answer is never. Until now. So why did Hollywood go silent? And why are the two men they're most afraid of right now, an action star who rides the subway, and a deeply Catholic actor who refuses to sell his soul? To understand what's happening right now in Hollywood, you need to know two names. Two men. Two very different careers. One very similar problem. The first is Jim Caviezel. If you know him at all, you probably know him from The Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson film that Hollywood declared dead on arrival in 2004 and watched in stunned silence as it earned $612 million on a $30 million budget. Caviezel is not a quiet man. He is a devout Catholic who speaks openly about his faith, about trafficking networks, about the people he believes are protected by institutional power. He is the kind of person Hollywood calls a liability. He is also the star of Sound of Freedom, the highest-grossing independent film of its release year, a movie that grossed $250 million while the entire establishment entertainment press looked the other way. The second name is Keanu Reeves. You know Keanu. Everyone knows Keanu. He is arguably the most universally liked celebrity on planet Earth. The man who gave away portions of his Matrix earnings so the special effects crew could get bonuses. The man who takes pay cuts so his co-stars can be paid more. The man who rides the subway, who sits on park benches, who hands sandwiches to people on the street and doesn't tell anyone about it. And here's the thing about a man who doesn't need anything Hollywood can offer him. He can't be bought. He can't be threatened. He can't be controlled. And in an industry built entirely on leverage, on knowing what people want, what they fear, what they'll sacrifice to stay at the table, a man without a price is the most dangerous kind of person in the room. Right now, in the corridors of Hollywood power, these two names are being spoken in the same breath, and it is not a compliment.
Let's start with Caviezel, because his story is the blueprint. His road to Sound of Freedom wasn't just difficult, it was 5 years long. 5 years of active, sustained resistance, not passive studio indifference, not scheduling complications, but deliberate institutional opposition to a film about the trafficking and exploitation of children. Think about what that means for a moment. Child trafficking is not a controversial cause. It is one of the few issues that every political tribe, every religion, every culture condemns without hesitation. There is no constituency for child exploitation. There is no think piece defending it. And yet, a film documenting the real-world rescue operations of a real-world federal agent, based on verifiable, documented events, spent 5 years being strangled before it reached an audience. The standard Hollywood playbook for a morally urgent subject would be to co-opt it, claim it, put marketing dollars behind it, wrap it in social justice language, position it for award season, and absorb the cultural credit. That is what Hollywood does with causes it wants to own. It did none of that with Sound of Freedom. Instead, it quietly refused to engage. And when the film somehow clawed its way to theaters anyway, released by a small distributor, carried almost entirely by word of mouth and faith community organizing, the response shifted.
The press moved to discredit it. Op-eds questioned the film's framing. Critics focused not on the documented reality of the story, but on the people promoting it. The goal was not to review the movie. The goal was to contaminate the conversation around it, to make the subject radioactive by association. But here's the part nobody expected. Audiences didn't care. $251 million later, Sound of Freedom had proven something that made the gatekeepers deeply uncomfortable. That there is a massive, underserved American audience that will show up in enormous numbers for a certain kind of story. And it doesn't need Hollywood's blessing to do it. That was dangerous enough. But then Caviezel started talking. Not just promoting the film, talking. About the structures. About the networks. About an industry he believes is not merely indifferent to the exploitation of children, but is actively invested in keeping that conversation from reaching its natural conclusions. He went on podcasts. He went on faith-based media. He used language that went far beyond the script of any press tour. He called it a system, an 8-armed machine with a head that, if you don't remove it entirely, simply grows the severed limb back. And when those words started reaching millions of people, when the momentum of Sound of Freedom fused with the specificity of Caviezel's accusations, the machine made its move. Not against Caviezel, against the man standing next to him.
Here is where someone most people wouldn't have expected to become part of this story steps into the frame. Mark Wahlberg. Wahlberg is not Jim Caviezel. He is not a firebrand. He does not go on podcasts and describe trafficking networks as 8-armed octopuses. He is, by Hollywood standards, a survivor. A man who came up through one of the most brutal gauntlets in the entertainment industry, rebuilt his image from near total public disgrace, and has maintained a position at the very top of the commercial food chain for 3 decades. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when someone understands the unspoken rules at a fundamental level, knows when to push, when to wait, when to say nothing, and when to say exactly what needs to be said. Which is why it matters that Mark Wahlberg has called Hollywood a monster. Not as a metaphor, not as a punchline, as a direct statement of belief from someone who has spent 30 years operating inside it. He's also gone on record refusing to deny his Catholic faith in an industry where, as he clearly understands, public expressions of sincere Christianity are treated as PR liabilities, where studios will greenlight anti-religious content at an industrial pace, while treating a filmmaker's expression of genuine faith as something that needs to be managed or suppressed. In that environment, "I do not deny my faith" is not a soft statement. It is a declaration. And now Wahlberg is pairing with Mel Gibson again. Let's talk about Gibson for a moment, because his story is the original template, the one that established the rules that Caviezel has since confirmed. Gibson made The Passion of the Christ in 2004 against the explicit opposition of virtually the entire Hollywood establishment. The smear campaign started before production was complete. No major studio would touch distribution. It was called dangerous, anti-Semitic, reckless, before a single person outside the production had seen a frame of it. It made $612 million. And then Hollywood made sure everyone knew everything Gibson had ever done wrong in his personal life. Every mistake, every controversy, every moment of weakness, amplified, catalogued, and deployed as justification for removing him from the rooms he had spent decades earning access to. But Gibson never disappeared. He kept working. He directed Hacksaw Ridge, earned an Academy Award nomination, and made the establishment deeply uncomfortable because they couldn't find a clean reason to dismiss it. And now he and Wahlberg are circling each other on a new collaboration. In another time, that would be a simple Hollywood news item.
In this specific moment, with Caviezel's words still in the public consciousness, with the Epstein documents in circulation, with a massive and newly energized audience that has demonstrated it will seek out stories the gatekeepers try to suppress, a Gibson-Wahlberg collaboration is not just a film, it is a signal.
Now we get to the piece of this that almost nobody is discussing. The man Hollywood least expected to become a problem, Keanu Reeves. Here's what you need to understand about Keanu's relationship with the Hollywood power structure. He has never needed it. When Fox Studios blacklisted him for nearly a decade after he refused to make Speed 2, a sequel he didn't believe in, his response was not to negotiate, not to apologize, not to take the first humiliating projects they dangled in front of him. He waited. He made the movies he wanted to make. He did theater. He lived his life. And then The Matrix happened, and he came back bigger than before on entirely his own terms. 10 years of institutional blacklisting for refusing to betray his own creative judgment. And he survived it not by playing the game, but by being genuinely indifferent to the outcome. That specific quality, the inability to be leveraged, is what makes Keanu Reeves uniquely dangerous to a system that runs on leverage. Hollywood's operating assumption, its foundational logic, is that everyone has a price. Everyone has something they're afraid to lose. Everyone can be controlled through the right combination of reward, threat, or exposure. The machine sustains itself by knowing what people want badly enough to compromise for. Keanu Reeves has, across 3 decades and in ways both large and documented and small and private, consistently disproved that assumption. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the status. He doesn't appear to need the approval. And someone who doesn't need anything cannot be bought, threatened, or silenced. But there's another dimension to what Keanu is doing right now that sounds technical on the surface and is actually about something much larger. He has become one of Hollywood's most vocal opponents of deepfake technology and unauthorized CGI manipulation of performers. On the surface, this looks like an actor protecting his image rights, a labor dispute, a reasonable concern about digital likeness and artistic integrity. Look closer. He has spoken specifically about the ability of studios to digitally manipulate a performance after the fact, to add emotional elements, expressions, even tears that the actor never experienced, never chose to express, never consented to. His objection is explicit. His emotional performance belongs to him. What he chooses to show on camera is a decision only he can make. But scale that up. If the technology exists to add a single tear to Keanu Reeves' face without his knowledge or consent, what else does the same technology make possible? What statements can be manufactured? What confessions can be fabricated? What evidence can be constructed from nothing and distributed to a global audience with no way for the average viewer to detect the manipulation? This is not a hypothetical. The technology is real. It is already being deployed. And one of the most trusted, most beloved, most credible public figures in the entertainment industry is standing up and saying clearly, this tool is being used to control what people see and believe, not just to make better movies, and I won't be part of it. That is not a man protecting his brand. That is someone throwing a wrench into a machine that depends on those tools to maintain its grip on reality itself. Comment below. Do you think the institutional silence around Sound of Freedom, a $251 million film, was accidental? Or was it something else entirely? The old model of power in Hollywood was simple. Control the story, and you control how people understand the world. You control which crimes get dramatized and which ones get ignored. Which heroes get celebrated and which ones get quietly destroyed. Which truths reach audiences and which ones spend 5 years in limbo before someone with nothing left to lose finally forces them through. That model worked for a very long time. But something has shifted.
The audience that showed up for Sound of Freedom wasn't following a critic's recommendation. The people reading the Epstein disclosures weren't waiting for a cable news anchor to tell them it mattered. The conversation that Caviezel, Wahlberg, Gibson, and Reeves are having, separately, differently, in their own voices and on their own terms, is not happening because Hollywood gave it permission. It's happening anyway. So here's the question worth sitting with. If the gatekeepers no longer control the gate, if the institutions that built their power on deciding what was real can no longer guarantee that their version of reality is the one that reaches people, what happens to the machine that was built entirely to run that control? And what happens to the names in the files it spent decades keeping quiet?